Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's discussion will be on reflection on elementals. And next week, the topic will be the Great Design. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. Our lodge, United Lodge of Theosophists, is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to this association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Voice of the Silence. Behold, it's written, ere the gold flame can burn with steady light, the lamp must stand well guarded in a spot free from all wind. Exposed to shifting breeze, the jet will flicker, and the quivering flame cast shades deceptive, dark and ever-changing, on the soul's white shrine. And then, O thou pursuer of the truth, thy mind-soul will become as a mad elephant that rages in the jungle. Mistaking forestries for living foes, he perishes in his attempts to kill the ever-shifting shadows dancing on the wall of sunlit rocks. Beware, lest in the care of self thy soul should lose her foothold on the soil of Deva knowledge. Beware, lest in forgetting self thy soul lose over its trembling mind control, and forfeit thus the due fruition of its conquests. Beware of change, for change is thy great foe. This change will fight thee off, and throw thee back out of the path thou treadest, deep into vicious swamps of doubt. Prepare, and be forewarned in time. If thou hast tried and failed, O dauntless fighter, yet lose not courage. Fight on, and to the charge return again and yet again. The fearless warrior, his precious lifeblood oozing from his wide and gaping wounds, will still attack the foe, drive him from out his strong hold, vanquish him, ere he himself expires. Act then, all ye who fail and suffer, act like him, and from the stronghold of your soul chase all your foes away, ambition, anger, hatred, even to the shadow of desire, when even you have failed. Remember, thou that fightest for man's liberation, each failure is success, and each sincere attempt wins its reward in time. The holy germs that sprout and grow unseen in the disciple's soul, their stalks wax strong at each new trial. They bend like reeds, but never break, nor can they ever be lost. But when the hour has struck, they blossom forth. Now for today's talk.
Good morning and welcome, friends. This is a subject that we return to often. It is important because as we listened to the talk last week, we went through the sevenfold nature of man. And in that sevenfold nature, all our sheaths are made up of elementals. For today's discussion, perhaps we will not go into the sevenfold, but we will at least discuss it as threefold. So perhaps we should put it up here. A spirit, a spiritual soul, mind, and then the lower physical aspect of us. One is visible. Three of these lower principles are not visible. Passions and desires, jiva or prana, astral body, and of course the physical. Okay, and of course all these have their Sanskrit terminology: atma bodhi manas, passions and desires, normally expressed as kama manas, because these two principles at this time of development in humanity, these two principles are normally given as kama manas, because they work together. And prana in the body, jiva general, astral body, and then physical body. Shula sarira is the physical body terminal. HPB has a 3-part article on the elementals, and I think it would be very beneficial if everyone read these articles for themselves. But to start with, we can ask, what are elementals? Are we separate from these beings or not? How do we approach the study of them? How do we learn what they are? How do you make them beneficent? Because we continuously use them. Now, this article, it says, each one of us attract and use these forces according to our individual capacity. The elementals are to say the tools we use to build our house of life. They are the fabric of our sensations, the form of our desires, the vitality of our thoughts and aspirations. Desire attracts the elementals. Thought directs them. Knowledge controls them. And this is the process we have to go through. So, this attracts them. This is very important. It's our desires that attracts them. And our thought, but look at where the thought is. It's supposed to direct them. But at this time, we're using the lower mind. This is the reflection from the higher, but nevertheless, it normally is attached to our passions and desires, and it pulls it down. So, and it says knowledge is what we need in order to direct them correctly and control them. If we do not have knowledge, we will not learn to control them. And we know why that is important, of course. Now, in the Gita, we are given 3 great qualities in nature. One class of these elementals belong to one of those great qualities. And these, of course, are elemental beings. They're incorporeal, spiritual essences. They're incorporeal, spiritual essences. And they are of a nature that we give them to. No feeling other than benevolence, kindliness, friendliness, humbleness attracts these elementals, which are listed under the sattvic quality. Let's put it here. So all of the good qualities in us attracts these kinds of elementals. Selfishness, ambition, greed, envy, jealousy, and such attract another class of elementals. And these are rajasic. Rajasic elementals. Well, who's giving them that impulse? We are giving it to them. So they are there to perform their functions in full because they have no mind, they have no other qualities than what we give them. So this Rajasic one is for our personal desires, and the gratification of it is the function of these elementals. Now, a third class is worn out by men. This is tamasic. Worn out. We have worn them out. And these elementals are dormant, inert, and lethargic. So Gita calls them indifferent and dark. So our bodies then are composed of a class of elementals, our senses of another. Our mental nature is a principle made up of elemental lives, and so our moral nature is a principle made up of still another class. So what makes a difference in our bodies? Different kinds of elementals. What makes a difference between a cart horse and a racehorse? Iron ore and fine steel. Simply different classes of elementals. We should understand that everything visible and invisible lives in forms seen and unseen, and it is all one life. So we said that this 3 constituting the higher triad is our spiritual aspect. We said the 4 constitutes the quaternary, and it is this lot down here. However, even in these, 3 of them are not visible. Only the physical body is visible. But nevertheless, the whole 7 constitution of man represents one life. If it was not for these elementals that we use in every aspect of our lives, there really would be no evolutionary process, because it is the elementals that give everything in nature their form. They constitute our forms. Everything in nature has a form, and these elementals are the ones that constitute it. So then when we look at our 7 constitution, and of course other kingdoms have a constitution also, however, from this diagram we should come to the conclusion that we're the highest developed on earth at this time. So we have a tremendous responsibility for all of the other kingdoms in nature, because what we do to ourselves through these elementals affect everything around us. And the tendency of nature is action. So we all act. Tendency is action. Everything continuously is involved in action. That is the great law of nature. It comes from, if you read the proem, there is this motion that is the inherent motion of our universe. So everything moves in that direction, to act, to move. There is no spirituality without movement, tells us H. really. So this action then is visible in all of nature, including men. And why is it there? What's its purpose? Because we're all striving towards perfection. Towards perfection. Towards perfection. Towards perfection. So their purpose is also to move towards perfection. And we have to help them achieve this. They lack conscience, they lack will, they lack intellect, and they lack ethical perception. But they still act. So their action then is automatic. It's reflex. I'll take some. So all tendencies towards action, and in elementals we see this as reflex action. It's automatic. It's automatic. So, what is that saying? That when a tiger gives them an impulse, then all these elementals act like a tiger. If an impulse is given to them by men, then they carry that impulse in the same way as a copper wire along which flies the announcement of the birth of a body or the death of one. It is the same wire, unchanged by the message of whatever nature or character. So whatever it is that we're impressing them with, that impulse is there, and they act according to that impulse. Impulse. So, we just talked about the 3 qualities from the Gita. We need to be aware as to what we are doing at all times. So it says, so this vast class of lives that we impress and incite to action, if we give them the beneficent impulse, then that's what they will return to us. They will be beneficent. And we discussed those qualities. We said kindliness, sympathy, generosity, appreciation, gratitude, all those feelings are recorded, and this impulse then directs them in which direction to act. But if we give them a maleficent feeling, well, that is what it is going to be expressed. What would that be? Avarice, cruelty, haughtiness, separateness, in other words, selfishness, separateness. So they will express that. So it can be beneficent, or maleficent. And the third class is mixed. Mixed. Gradually, these reflex actions give the elementals a permanent reflex, is what it is stated as. So we give them this impulse. It can be beneficent, maleficent, or mixed. And eventually this becomes a permanent impulse, or reflex, permanent reflex. Because it's reflex action, which is automatic, but that reflex becomes permanent because the impulse given to them is repeatedly beneficent, or repeatedly maleficent, or repeatedly mixed. Now, gradually these reflex actions give the elementals a permanent reflex, crystallized action, which we call the laws of the chemical element. They combine and recombine, and we have gross matter. Now, as we act in organic matter, we should be able to see that we must have produced the vegetable kingdom as well as the mineral kingdom. In the vegetable kingdom, the law of life and growth and action is a mixture of reflex action of body and a dawning perception in intelligence of the differences between one thing and another. Such are the first faint signs of that intelligence, which is perception of the difference between good and evil. In the Secret Doctrine 1, starting on page 289, there is about 4 or 5 pages where from unseen extracts before is given in condensed form how the great life gives these impulses to different parts of nature. And that is also a very useful 4 or 5 pages to read. Not only does it explain the nature and how it comes about into the different kingdoms, but what that one life is. And then it makes it a little bit more easier for us to understand our sevenfold nature as well. So then, in that passage, it is stated that it is the one life that turns around and informs these kingdoms. So these elemental beings are given a primary impress, obviously, but what we do with them is what makes them what they become. what we do with them. And we just said that when this reflex action becomes a permanent, then we see that expressed as laws of chemical compounds, chemical elements, chemical compounds, because they combine and recombine by the impress given to them, and eventually it becomes a permanent reflex that makes it the law of nature. So, if then we're responsible for bringing these kingdoms about, and we see that all animal life, we didn't talk about animals yet, but all minerals and all plant botanic life is not beneficent. Everything has a good side and a dangerous or maleficent side, and we need to understand that we're the ones that are giving it to them. So then we have the animal kingdom manifesting still in another way. So when that one life is turning around and informing these kingdoms, to the mineral kingdom it gives polarity. To the plants it gives color and smell or aroma, and to the animal world it gives instinct. And now we will see why this is important. So, we said that a fixed action or law is perceptible in the inorganic kingdom. Instinct exhibits itself in the lowest form of the organic life, and more than instinct we see impulse in the animals, and finally we express reason in man. So, just as the second reader child is not only learning something new, but carries with him all that the first reader child is learning, so is the same with men. So all these lives, having passed through all the kingdoms of nature at some time or other, and us doing the same thing in prior periods of manifestation, we now have in ourselves various classes of action. We said that reflex action first, then comes habitual, instinctual, habitual, instinctual, impulsive, then reason. So, as we find ourselves now, our acts are those that are connected with the lower kingdoms. But the governing action should be and must eventually be from the intuitional and the intellectual side. Intuitional and intellectual side. How may such action become the usual and therefore natural action in man? What must we do then in order to realize this? Well, when we use an impulse that we give to the elementals, from which part of us is it coming? Is it from sympathy, generosity, kindliness, appreciation, or the ones that separate us from all the rest of humanity, avarice, cruelty, haughtiness, unkindness, meanness? So, when we do this, we are then building a wall. Hidden and inert lies in it the gems of common human feelings. So when a man does the cruelest stuff, he's ensealed, but he's not ensouled. And he fancies that this is impregnable. Not so, says HPB in many of her writings. The edifice which the personal man thought so secure will crack under the shocks of sorrow, suffering, illusion, and then the man will catch a glimpse of the forgotten treasure in himself. So, shocks, suffering, pain will crack the walls and will allow us to have a look through that crack what we are missing. So, as we also heard last week, that the first inquiry that comes to us is, why me? Why am I suffering this pain? Why so much negativity in my life? So the desire to ease that pain becomes kind of permanent in us, because we want to know what it is that we're doing wrong, and we want to get rid of it, and we want to know how to do it. So it is the attraction of these elementals that will actually enable us to open that crack wider. We said that the wall cracks that we have built, the wall that we have built cracks. The wall cracks, and then we have to widen the cracks. Because the crack is when life enables us to have a look on the inside and see what it is that we're missing. And when the cracks start opening larger and larger, it gives us a better idea as to what it is that we have done wrong. And what then should we do? The process of cleansing the mind, or clearing up karma, is essential. So it is the dispersal of certain elementals that have been amassed at the strategic points in the personal nature. So wrong desire obviously attracted these elementals, wrong thought directed them, wrong action made a matrix of them. What will disperse them? Right motivation. So it's our motivation that is really important. Right motivation disperses all these negative elementals in us, so it enables us to change them, attract new ones into ourselves. Next, the treasures of the mind: fairness, honest consideration of every idea on its own merits, conscientious evolution, suspended judgment, and the like. What about these? No wall, it is stated, is so nearly impregnable as that of a mind encased in prejudice, preconception, and prejudgment. This wall is built by pride, self-satisfaction, and mostly by suspicion of others. But we cannot attack it from the outside. The effective onslaught must come from within. How shall we proceed, it says? Well, this is a term is as occult magic. Occult magic. Occult magic. We know that there is no magic in the sense that everything goes according to laws of nature, but nevertheless it is specified as occult magic. The very thoughts that have helped in uncovering the psychic treasures have, by a sort of a spiritual alchemy, attracted the form of better desires, which in turn animate a higher level of thought necessary for their constructive use. Now, self-induced and self-devised efforts bring into potency the previously hidden powers of the mind. Man, now realizing his identity with all humanity, consciously attacks the final fortification. He strives to discover the supreme treasure, the real man, the real God within himself, and that is what occult magic is, the real man. So then, level after level of thought, step after step, in realization, lie behind and ahead of the warrior who would successfully assail the series of fortifications of the personal nature. But the goal is seen, however dim its outlines, and however faint the path thereto. So there comes to this man, now motivated by the desire for identification with the self of all, the realization that within his compound being, here and now, there is a center in which the real man dwells. So, here and now. Here and now. There is a center that we need to go to. In Mr. Judge's article, it is stated as to assume the position of the real man. So why is that so very important? It is so very important because it is the change of the mind's polarity that is essential for permitting the emergence of the God instead of the intrusion of the elementals. So the change of the mind's polarity. Change of mind's polarity. Change of the mind's polarity will permit the emergence of that center that we wish to go to. But even then, we have to be aware as to what it is we are doing. And by adopting an ethical basis as a platform for setting up causation and becoming a consciously cognizant of our inner nature, then it enables us to become a force in nature to benefit humanity. We will conclude with this statement. Man's work even now is not done. He, the manvantaric artisan, must continue building. His open eyes now see another kind of wall. A wall constructed to protect humanity from the hordes of vandal elementals attracted by its folly. Into this structure, the enlightened man lays his bricks, made up of 1,000 renunciations of the personal self, and with selfless devotion he cements them into place. Thus he adds to and reinforces that guardian wall which was erected eons ago by the masters of compassion, and which is by them continuously sustained as a protection for all humanity. So we can decide to join and become helpers in that effort. And now we will open it for questions and answers? Yes.
Talk about the necessity to become selfless because we are naturally selfish. We're really deep down inside selfless. We become selfish almost as soon as we hit this material world. So we have to make these inner adjustments to get back on the path.
Well, we're composed of elementals, we said.
Right.
And the mineral world is acting according to their nature. The polarity is there, negative, positive. Otherwise, no existence would be possible. Centrifugal, centripetal, negative, positive. All of us have these forces in us. Centrifugal is center out, centripetal is periphery in. And what did we finish it? We said that we have to become cognizant of our motive in doing things, because it's the only time that by alchemical processes in the body we will attract the right elementals into us and expel the ones that are not useful for that purpose, because that effort, self-induced, self-devised effort, when we become aware of what we are doing, changes the polarity of the mind. Where did we put that? Did we put it up here?
At the bottom.
I don't see it. Changes, oh, here it is. Changes the polarity. Changes the polarity of the mind. This is very important because this is the alchemical process that is necessary. What are we cultivating with this process? Our intuitional powers. We have been addressing that intuition in many, many different ways, because remember, we are sevenfold and it can be addressed from a different aspect every time. And we need to understand that this is where we are going. This is our duty to go there. Because not only a necessary step in our evolutionary process, but in the future, Mr. Judge says, power is going to be needed. Can we? Yes.
I was going to ask the polarity. Can you explain that a little bit more? Does it tie to centrifugal, centripetal motion, or what exactly do you mean by polarity? Is it only mind related, or overall body, physical body, and everything else?
We're talking about the mineral world to start with, right? If chemical affinity did not exist, positive attracting negative and negative attracting positive, there would be no chemical compounds in nature. Would there be? Sodium chloride, for instance, what it is made up of. Its molecular structures is combination of sodium and chloride. One is positively charged, the other one is negatively charged. We said at the beginning of this talk that it is our thinking that crystallizes the impulse given to those compounds, because once that reflex action becomes a permanent action, that's when you have that molecular structure fixed. So all of the elements of nature are made up of these elementals. HPV's article calls them by names. Gnomes are of earth. Earth. Undines, water. Salamanders, fire. And there's one more, air. And there's another one for air. So there are 4 different groups of elementals in nature, but their action is fixed by the impulse we give them. What is it that we use in giving that impulse? Thinking, thought, in other words, comes first. What is that based on? Motive. And that's why this is all interconnected with one another, because we need to be aware of what it is that we're doing. Let's just visit this. We said that in men we have reflex action, habitual action, instinctual action, impulsive action, and then comes reason action. And that in the future, our actions should be dependent on intellectual reasoning as well as intuitional perceptive powers. So, negative and positive comes into your thinking process, does it not? Does it not?
Mm-hmm.
There are positive qualities in nature that you express within yourself, and negative qualities in nature as well as mixed. So, what would you call the good qualities in nature? Would you make them a positive impulse? If that is a positive impulse, its opposite then becomes a negative impulse. In other words, beneficent, if you call it positive, maleficent then becomes negative. And if you are not giving the elemental the same impulse every time, then its nature is mixed, because the reflex action is not crystallized in them yet. So when we become aware that our thought process is causing that impulse to become positive or negative, that's when you can control it. I can't remember the fourth quality, fourth name, but it has one. This is air. Oh, when I remember it, I'll put it up there. So, H.P.'s article says that the universal ether was not, in the eyes of ancients, simply a tenantless something, stretching throughout the expanse of whole heaven. It was for them a boundless ocean, people like our familiar earthly seas, with gods, planetary spirits, monstrous and minor creatures, and having in its every molecule the germs of life, from the potential up to the most developed. Like the finny tribes which swarm in our oceans and familiar bodies of water, each kind having its habitat in some spot to which it is curiously adapted, some friendly and some inimical to men, some pleasant and some frightful to behold, some seeking the refuge of quiet nooks and landlocked harbors, and some traversing great areas of water. So the various races of the planetary, elemental, and other spirits were believed by them to inhabit the different portions of the great ethereal ocean, and to be exactly adapted to their respective conditions. Because these ethereal entities occupy the ether, and she writes it this way. Ether. It's not the ether of the chemical compounds we are talking about. This is the ethereal, universal aspect of what we don't see, because it's invisible. But in the article referred to, or the passage referred in the Secret Doctrine 1 on page, starting on 289 to 90 to 91, she explains that the one life to the entranced seer is like a mist spread everywhere in the universe. And that's where you have to go if you want to understand all of the principles of nature, all of the kingdoms of nature, and what you are made up of, because you're a miniature copy of that universe that we live in. So, centrifugal and centripetal forces is explained in the Secret Doctrine. HPV says the balance point is Libra or Libra, which is also stands for Hermes. Balance. Libra, and so what would happen if balance was not there? Balance is in you and in me also. Otherwise, we would not be normal human beings. What is the balance expressed in the Secret Doctrine? She says that if the centrifugal force had its way, what would it do to you? It would push you outward to where? To the most utmost periphery of our solar system. You would be totally dispersed. What would the other one do? It would push you into the sun, into the central spiritual sun, and you would be burned to cinders. So the connection is that both polarity at a balance point is in you also. And that is what constitutes a normal human being whose mind is balanced. But if one was greater than the other one, what would we be classified as? Mad. You would not be able to function, because both is necessary as a balanced component in us. So that is important to understand. There was a section in here where she said that this explanation she gives from another book. She also lists in the first part of that article that we referred to the different types of elementals, and the generic name is Madan. She uses the generic name Madan. Madan. That's what she uses for elemental spirits. And then she lists the different types of them. She says Madan is a generic name indicating wicked elemental spirits, half brutes, half monsters. For Madan signifies one that looks like a cow. He is the friend of the malicious sorcerers and helps them to effect their evil purposes of revenge by striking men and cattle with sudden illness and death. So even though these things sound unreal, nevertheless, they exist in nature and they are there and they can be used. And then she talks about Shudala Madan, which is the visitor of burial spots and places of execution. And she says this answers to our gauls. And then Kuti, Shatan, juggling imp. And Shudala, she says, is a half fire, half water demon. And Shudala Madan is another mischievous spook. It is skilled in pottery and baking and likes compliments and flattery. Kumil Madan is the Undine proper, and we said Undine was water, and helps all those who resort to hydromancy or divination by water. So then the different parts of these elemental beings is discussed in this article that she wrote. And she tells us that they don't have tangible bodies, only astral forms, which partake to a distinguishing degree of the element which they belong and also of the ether. They are a combination of sublimated matter and rudimental mind. Some remain throughout several cycles changeless, but still have no separate individuality, acting collectively, so to say. Others of certain elements and species change from under a fixed law. The most solid of their bodies is ordinarily just immaterial enough to escape perception by our physical eyesight, but not so unsubstantial but that they can be perfectly recognized by the inner or clairvoyant vision. They not only exist and can all live in ether, but can handle and direct it for the production of physical effects as readily as we can compress air or water for the same purpose by pneumatic and hydraulic apparatus, in which occupation they are readily helped by the human elementaries or shells. So, they are very proficient in ether, in other words. Our astral body is made up of elementals that also belong to that field operation, but we, unlike the elementals, don't know how to use that field. And this is why they're telling us that we need to learn what our astral body is made up of and move in the direction of learning how to use it and eventually learn to control it. Because as we listed our actions, we started with reflex, went to habitual, instinctual, impulsive, and reason. HBB says most people use impulsiveness, in other words, to react to what occurs to them. What they're asking us is not to do that, not to use impulsive action, but to stand still and think about what that action should be before we respond to whatever event comes to us in life. Because only then we will not make useless karma that we have to face either in this life, but most likely in a future life. And they want us to use our intellect, reason with our intellect, and cultivate our intuitional faculties so that discrimination that we use would be the correct one to give the beneficent impulse to these beings, so that when they crystallize, they will become a beneficent or helping hand, rather than hiding the truth from us because we have put all of the wrong elementals in the key positions in our constitution.
I think you're getting into what I was just thinking. Oh, sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
What I was thinking a minute ago. When I'm thinking of elementals, I'm thinking about the spirit. When I'm thinking of atoms, they're different, right? Atoms and cells are different than elementals.
Elementals are the souls of the elements, so whatever constitutes them, they're there.
To go back to the point that you just made, reflexive action becomes permanence, reflex, and then it
becomes habitual.
Habitual, instinctual, impulsive, and then we said reason.
Right.
So it crystallizes more and more along the way. These elementals crystallize, and
once it crystallizes,
our habitual behavior is because of that, right? Crystallized elementals.
But remember that reflection is in the crystallines, because they're then becoming permanent compounds. Remember, in other words, we are shaping what compounds we are going to have in our universe. We are the ones that are giving them that impulse to crystallize. So, and once it crystallizes, remember there's 4 types of elementals she discusses it with the mineral, that diagram she has in the Secret Doctrine. There are 3 elemental groups before the minerals come about, and after mineral, then she says this is the starting point of our evolutionary process. But the elementals, there are 3 groups of elementals below that line. So, say your question again.
So we're going down or up that path, whatever you want to call it, habitual, instinctual, impulsive, reason, so that we
the lower kingdoms uses those powers, right?
Okay.
We use, the lower kingdoms use reflex, habitual, because when you look at the lower level life, what they do comes from habit. It's habitual. They repeat the same action over and over again. Then it becomes instinctual, like when the birds build their nests and so forth. That's an instinct in them. Also, when they migrate, they know what to go. It was very interesting to read that the hummingbird babies are left behind. When the parents raise them, the parents depart first. So the baby hummingbirds grow up and they know exactly what to do when they migrate south from, say, from Washington, D.C. So that's an instinctual action. And we see more and more of the impulsive action in the animal world. Instinct and impulse works together for the animals, and then reason action in us. But look at where our reasoning is. We put it with kama manas. In other words, our passional nature gives that automatic impulse to it. We don't stop and reason as to what we are doing, but automatically we go to whatever it is that we're responding to and go ahead and respond to it, and then later we say, oh my gosh, I did it wrong, because we didn't stop to think about it. So in the human kingdom, it is reasoned action because we have a mind. All these other lower kingdoms do not. In human, it's reason. But what they want us to do here is move from kamamanas to buddhimanas. Remember, we said this is a spiritual soul, and wisdom comes with that, right? Knowledge is not automatically wisdom. We have to have the light of the higher ego shine through the Buddhic aspect onto the mind and enlighten the mind. The higher mind then controls the lower mind, and then the body goes along with the higher aspect of your life and becomes a channel to let the light shine through, because it's a beneficent force, and your aim and motive is to benefit all humanity. But if it is here, kamamanas is purely intellectual. It has no orientation towards serving the whole. It serves itself, which becomes then selfish and separative. And that is what your impulse is, what you're giving to the elementals in your constitution. And they want you to change that around. They want us to change it around, make it more beneficent. Thank you for coming. Please join us next week.